Oh,
We'll wait.
it's 2 o'clock. Okay, it is 2 o'clock and this meeting will come to order. First item of business is the roll call and everyone is here except for Julie Sod, and she had told me she wasn't sure she wouldn't be able to make it. So next is budget discussion. So you want to lead that?
Yeah, I'll start. So you have a couple of handouts in front of you. Sorry, I'm speaking closer. Let me start, if I can, by explaining that we had a little bit of technical difficulties during the recording of yesterday's meeting. And so we believe we've resolved them. There was some software that needed to be updated, and that is why we now have a temporary audio recording as backup. So most of yesterday's meeting was not recorded for audio. It was recorded for video only. So
That'd be
So
exciting.
is today audio only and no video?
no, we're still
Oh, yeah,
doing
yeah,
it.
okay.
We downloaded new software and it was to fix the problem that happened yesterday. And so hopefully, but just in case the software, the problem isn't resolved, we wanted to make sure we would have backup. So in your packet, or one of the items that we provided you was kind of a breakdown to Tom's question yesterday about how do some of those line items break down. And so I can just kind of briefly go through it. Youth services, we sort of broke it down into supplies, materials, summer reading, and consumables.
You want us to ask questions as we go along with those or wait?
You can, I'm open, whichever. You'll see some similarities between the services. So,
Okay.
you know, if you want me to go through once quickly and then we can go back. Okay. And then adult programming, presenters and programs, materials and supplies. Some of our supplies include like printed material, things like that. Marketing and communication, summer reading, contract work, printed materials, community events, publications. So 63% summer reading. So I hope I can answer something.
Your question on the first one, youth
Uh-huh.
services,
Uh-huh.
it says summer reading for 38%.
Mm-hmm.
But I like these pie charts, they're very nice.
Uh-huh.
And it's much easier than looking at detailed listing, I agree. But what do we mean by summer reading? Does that mean hiring a contractor? I understand what supplies are, consumables and materials, those are fairly straightforward. What does summer reading mean? I don't know what that is.
So summer reading and youth services is both our teen program and our 0 to 10. So summer reading we have programs for all ages for summer reading, but for youth services, it's specifically 0 to 18. And so it would include everything from paid performers to,
Yeah, it's like paid performers. We do bigger events at the local library, so they consume more supplies at these bigger events.
Well, you have supplies on there.
Right, but there's also separate, like summer reading is its own function, and we have prizes that we provide for the people who are registered and complete the tasks for summer reading.
This is the brochure for summer reading for this year, and it shows all of the programs that are provided during the summer for all ages.
yes.
And we got this handed out a little while ago, but they're available all over the place.
And like we hire out sort of national like a magician or a storyteller, and so we're paying for those individuals to come and present throughout the summer, and that is what comes out of summer reading.
So it's mostly, we'll call it contractors. I mean, these are outside people that are paid to come in and do or perform.
It's not all of that.
I mean,
It's
we
like
have supplies and consumables and everything else here. I'm just trying to understand this. So
it's prizes for the people who register for summer reading, like the little kids, they'll get books and other reading incentives. So that's also summer reading.
But I'm just trying to understand, what is the majority of that piece of the pie? What does that mean?
We have,
Again, it doesn't mean I'm opposed to, I'm just trying to understand it.
we have that information available. So each department organizes their how they do their budget a little bit different. Karen is Karen goes into great depth. She actually has all of her receipts for the entire year. It's a huge booklet. She groups them together, like with summer reading together, because that in her brain is where part of her budget goes. She knows with youth services, a large portion of her budget is going to be dedicated to summer reading because that's when we amp up and do so many wonderful programs for the community.
So I maybe will clarify too. So it's because we framed it in terms of summer reading, we're really talking about programs that start in June and run through August is I think how it would be better to clarify for you. Summer reading is more of a time. I mean, we think of it as professionals. Again, the kids are out of school, so we have them here and members of the community. So I would think of it more maybe in that context as encompassing everything we spend in those 3 months. So we do disproportionately spend. We don't spend a 12th, the 12th, the 12th. We spend a lot in the summer.
How long have we been doing this summer reading program?
How long has the library been in existence?
Yeah.
There's always been a summer reading program of some sort.
And it's not individual to this library. This
No.
summer reading program do we tap into a national?
Cooperative, yes. And so all of our artwork, a lot of the stuff we don't have to design in-house because it's already been created for adults, teens, and children. So like on your flyer there, you had all those graphics, the artists, the national artists are doing it, and we pay for the service or it's paid for by our state commission, depending on the state, but then we get it for free.
I guess what I was trying, this is a big deal on libraries national.
It is.
So the question I had was on the line items, the budget. You got adult programs, children's programs. Am I missing words? Skills.
Youth services would include teen and children.
I don't see teenage. Is it under, is it one of these lines, 26 or 20?
Youth services is the same thing as children's programs.
And
What, so why, sorry, I just got to follow, why was it dropped this year? 43,000 to 38,000 or something? Last we were gonna do,
But I believe that's because we're trying to find money to balance the budget. Is that correct?
Right, like these sheets are for the upcoming year of our proposed, so it wasn't cut for this year. We have the same amount. This is a proposed cut for the coming year.
yeah, for the coming year, that's what it's about. Why do we think we can do it less?
As Vanessa just said, we're simply trying to find money in the budget.
What is suffering when you cut 5?
We would do less programs and we would have less robust programs.
another question. The biggest piece of the pie on youth services is summer reading. And the biggest piece of the pie on marketing and communications is summer reading. What's the difference between summer reading under marketing and communications and youth services? I don't understand. The same program is being funded under 2 different things. I don't know.
So the marketing and communications budget for summer reading is, the majority of it is that guide that Katie just held up. So we print about 3,000 of those. And so that's where that money is coming out of.
But it said there's another category called printed materials under marketing and communications.
Right, so that's like
So-
all of the things that we do throughout the rest of the year.
Like this.
It's all of our brochures. It's, communication that would happen the rest of the year, not during the summertime.
Well, it says summer reading. Summer reading, 63% of marketing and communications is devoted to summer reading. And 38% of youth services is devoted to summer reading.
I
And
guess I
printed
don't-
material is obviously a separate. piece
I don't
of the
understand
pie.
your question.
I don't understand how there's the same item under two different departments, or are those two things there combined? Well, no, they're two different line items in the budget, so I don't understand that.
So under the youth services,
Mhm.
the amount of money youth services gets, they spend 38% of that money on summer reading, youth services. Marketing communications is a totally different line item, and they're spending 63% of their budget on, say, getting the word out, like Katie showed you, not on the prizes or the programming, but on getting the word out, the marketing, that kind of thing. Is that right?
That's correct.
That helps.
Okay.
I think the point of breaking it out in marketing is just to help us see. Is, because we could have put it under printed material. Our summer reading program is growing, is that correct? I mean, I would think that it has been bigger.
And I wish I brought the information on our participation in summer reading. It's really important, I think, to see the numbers of programs that we offer and the response from the community. So we always have strong numbers at story times and things like that. But again, the audience size grows in the summer. So it's very successful. So I think it's probably more fair to look at that information as well. So I can follow up and send you some of our specific summer reading program. We have participation numbers, so we know how many people have signed up. We have completion numbers, so we know how many people have completed the program. We have a breakdown by age, so we can tell you exactly how many adults participated, teens, children. And so I can provide you that information.
And the commitment in terms of summer reading is not just to prevent fun, but the commitment is the library commitment to literacy. So that it is about literacy for kids over the summer.
There's a great deal of information, and you may have heard it before, about the summer slide,
Yes.
essentially where children that go to school or are not in a more formal all-year program lose a lot of their retention, lose reading skills. So there's a lot of data and research that really supports the efforts of the library in picking up that piece during the summer. So our programs are a combination of fun and entertainment, but then also literacy and education and getting kids to read in the summer.
Follow up on that is, I'm all for having encouraging children to read and giving them prizes for kids did that and they had rocket in their hands and they got prizes that they, once they read to the next level. I'm just wondering, I guess I'm a public, I'm not seeing that brochure, but are there other things like Parks and Recs type things where you're having events where you're doing face painting or you're doing, day in the park or nature walks, or are there other things that aren't book reading related in this summer programs?
I mean, I would recommend looking at the guide to see all
Yeah.
the different programs, because every single program has a literacy focus, but it could be also STEAM or STEM. So there's engineering, there's math, there's technology, there's art. There is developing your motor skills. So like the programs are not all just reading. It's a huge variety of things to build up little citizens. Will that answer your question?
I think, well, I need to look at it.
Okay.
And I have a question. Anyway, I'll wait. Did you, training and conference, is that one line item? Or is that a couple line items? One. Yes. I was just curious. It's one.
You have to know which one it is.
So,
Continuing ed, 68?
78.
Okay.
what are the regional and national conferences and Who gets to go to them? Do people just request it or how does that work?
We do have an approval process. I'll let Lindsay talk about it. Yeah.
So we look at the year calendar to see like what conferences are going to be somewhat close, what conferences are national, and kind of try to plan out what is the most affordable option. So like there are local conferences like the Idaho Library Association, there's the Pacific Northwest Library Association Conference, and there are national conferences like the Public Library Association Conference. And so staff can submit a request to attend a conference, and then the administrative team evaluates where we're at. Does it align with what the job is that the person does? Does it align with the budget? And then we make a decision that way. And it's all based on, does it align with what the needs are of the organization, and to help make sure we're doing bigger and better things for the community through this, my training staff.
So do staff get to select one a year or do they get to do it?
No, I didn't answer that part. Yes. So, every single staff member does not go to a conference. Like when, for example, we have the Idaho or the Pacific Northwest Library Association conference in Moscow in the coming months, and an email is sent out to managers and staff that work more than 24 hours or 20 hours a week. And they are able to tell us if they're interested in going. And then we evaluate the list and see what our budget is. And that's kind of like, I track and see what's on the horizon, and then I send out an email to see who wants to go to those kinds of things.
Do they get to just choose one year or do they, can they pick up? all?
Yeah, most people don't even go to one a year. It's, if you're a manager, it'd be lovely to get to go to one, but not everybody does or wants to. And there's not like a hard rule that says you must go to one conference, or you only get to go once every 5 years either.
Sometimes the conferences have a focus like on children's programs or something. Is that correct? And then sometimes that would be a year we would be like, okay, this is, a lot of people from youth services would benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we look at our strategic plan, I bet,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what conferences would support that.
So a year ago, you ended up not going to one, but didn't you Zoom one or something? And if so, what did you think about it? What you saw?
I wasn't able to go, so they did have an online, some of the classes, not all of them.
Was it anything trustee wise, or did you?
Not a whole lot. But they did provide materials and resources, and there were some useful things in there.
I have a question regarding dues. I alluded to it yesterday, or brought it up more specifically. How much of the dues, if any, are going to the American Library Association?
I don't have that information with me.
And the reason I ask that is I don't know that the American Library Association is aligned with my general direction where I might want to go with this board. I'm not saying in all things, but they do appear to be a relatively liberal organization. And I, as a person who's also involved in approving or disapproving this budget, would like to know that, because if they're actually going in an opposite direction and we want to go, I feel a little bit uncomfortable supporting an organization that's fighting against where we want to go. So I do need to know, and I would like to know that information. Not necessarily now, if you don't have it with you, it's fine, but I need that information in order to decide whether I agree with this amount or whatever it is.
One thing I would think would be I don't know how familiar you are with the American Library Association, but it is far bigger than just a couple minute conversation and has far more impact for public libraries, not only in this country, but actually internationally. I think it's important to understand the scope of what it is because there is right now there seems to be some information or a feeling about it that it's a super liberal organization, but I'm not sure that we all have a complete understanding of everything it does or why it is important that this library be able to look to the American Library Association, not necessarily for everything, but I suspect it's very, I mean, this is our national organization, the way the American Medical Association is, so it is, it's important to understand the full scope of the organization, I would think.
I think, well, I was just reading an article, so I don't know if it was today's or I think it was within the last week that the state of Montana or Wyoming, but I think it was Montana, just disassociated from the ALA, the entire state. And I think that the Public Library Association is just a subsidiary of.
It's one branch of ALA.
Where was that from, Rochelle?
I have it on my phone. I can send it to you later. I'll
Okay.
Send it to Alexa and she can send it out to the board.
Yeah, because if it happened, it's probably easy to Google and find other articles on that, if you remember what state it was. Montana, you said, or?
I believe it was Montana.
Okay.
And I think that they were saying that Wyoming already had, but
Okay.
I may have.
Yeah, if you can get
exposed
that out, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think I would really like to, and there are probably other things I can Google, but I would really like to have the one that you looked at.
And out of curiosity, as a professional librarian, Rochelle, what do you consider the benefit of disassociating from ALA? Like, what would be the purpose of the library doing that?
I'm not financially supporting their agenda of either allowing or pushing that children are exposed to sexually explicit materials that the studies show that those materials harm children.
And I can expand on it maybe a little bit, is it does appear that that organization is militantly defending any and all access to all kinds of material to children or people of all ages, including children. And I'm sure the organization's been around a long time. I looked them up. I spent a good bit of time on their website. They probably have a lot of good things they've done. They've been around for, I don't know, over 100 years probably, but they've gone in the wrong direction on certain areas, in my opinion. And because I'm involved in this budget, I disagree if we're funding, meaning the memberships, then I don't want to use the taxpayers' money to support ALA.
And I agree with Tom, but there's not a lot of money there
No.
to save. Maybe it's more appropriate that we just do a policy at some point saying that we're not gonna pay for it. It's gonna be hard to do that with the budget.
I would also like to hope that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we don't throw out things that are very beneficial for this library, without looking at them carefully.
And I would propose, not a move here, but we identify how much money will be going towards part of this budget, ALA. We reduce that line item by that amount of money. And then later on, as Tim just said, then we make a policy change and say, we're not using the taxpayers' money to support ALA memberships by library staff. So I'd still like to know what that number is eventually, so we can adjust that line item.
So the big numbers of your sheets here are the first four: youth services and programming, marketing and training and conference. We talked about three of them, but we didn't talk about adult programming. I'm really reluctant to impact children and encouraging them to read. I'm not interested in expanding into Parks and Recs type of program where we're going for walks in the woods and, or I don't know, face painting or other things, but adult programming, I'm really, that's a big question in my mind. How much of this programs and materials, I assume we're paying for people to come in and present, but can you give me examples of what it is in the adult programs that presenters and programs are doing?
Yeah.
So like one example is we had an expert beekeeper come and she spoke at many of the libraries so that our local families that are homesteading or doing small farms could learn about pollinating and build a better garden. We've had someone do storytelling about local Idaho history. We have musicians who come and do concerts. And we have just like skill learning events. I know, Tim, that you have mentioned like soup and soup making and things like that is not important. But we do have demonstrations like on canning and how to preserve foods and how to be frugal. And we have writing classes on how to be an author, how to write a children's book, all of those various things.
And I would just add that literacy, as the librarian, we define it as more than just printed material. There's an aspect of financial literacy, for example. So we often have programs like Smart Money Week, where there's, individuals that I like to call adulting that are learning skills. And so there's quite a few different kinds of literacy that we're focusing on. I like to call some of the adult programming as, what it takes to be a citizen in today's world, right? And so that can be whether that's information or technology and learning and things like that. Those are all essential skills to be productive today.
Digital literacy.
Digital literacy.
Yeah, which absolutely is essential in this day and age and difficult for a lot of adults.
So a hard question is, how much of this would be, if I advocated reducing this by half to 10K, how much of this would be cut out? Would it just be half the programs, or would there be a bunch of programs like the beekeepers you still did that wasn't material? Are there a lot of volunteer things in it that you could still do? I'm just trying to be frugal and try to figure out how we can balance this budget. And to me, is not
If you
for library thing.
If you took half this budget away, we would probably no longer have any of our special big events such as concerts, canning, beekeeping, those skill building classes. We would just be doing smaller programs that are staff led, but not necessarily what our community wants or attends.
You can actually go on our website and it has all of our events. And so just for some learning, go take a look. There's a lot of programs.
I don't doubt there's a lot, and I'm just, maybe if we're trying to fund salary increases for all the staff, and that's important, and we don't lose people, and trying to buy books, maybe we're doing too much, is what I'm asking.
And I have no desire to decimate, let's say, adult programming or youth services. But I would say in the short term, yeah, if there was a way to slightly reduce these to get ourselves on a balanced budget. But I think in the long term, there's probably a lot of benefit to, I'll say, like a volunteer coordinator type person and bringing in people that will do things and projects and so forth for no cost. And instead, and again, I don't know how many things are being paid for directly in here, meaning we paying for somebody to come in here and give a particular program. But I don't think that the library should try and compete with the Croc Center or the senior center or be a childcare center. So these things probably have their place, but again, these are nice to have things, but are they critical services, we'll say, that the taxpayer needs to pay for, like police and fire? So I'm not trying to say we eliminate these, but I think in the long term, we want to think more in terms of volunteers. A volunteer coordinator brings people in and does things for nominal or free. And anyway, and keep these line items much lower. But I know we have people also employed to run these programs, so I don't want, I'm very humane. I don't want people fired. So I'd like people to keep on, and my overall goal, to be honest with this whole budget, is zero tax increase. And I would like to see employees paid at least at market rates. That's my grand scheme of what I'm looking at here in the budget. For me personally, I can't speak for everybody else.
And thank you for saying that just now. Chair, I was about to ask you to maybe get a idea of what we're even talking about, because we're talking about the budget, kind of like, we need to find out where people are on what they want percentage wise. Then we can actually focus on how much money we actually need to scrape up. So I think we need to find out where people are on 0, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, yeah, I asked Alexa what she thought we should focus on first, but that was a little premature. I asked that a couple meetings ago, so.
I think it's helpful to me. We only have 3 weeks to get this done. And I will acknowledge that Janelle has been very instrumental in putting these documents together, and she has a leave from the 14th through the 23rd. So there will be kind of a hiatus between when we can probably print more documents. So the sooner that we start moving on the percentages, that's helpful.
I would also like to say that you have a sheet here that I would really like to focus on.
Okay,
Well,
I'm open.
Yeah, and let me just say one last thing about the percentages, because the 0% that Tom just mentioned, I believe we're in the hole over $200,000. So honestly, taking 10,000 here, 10,000 there isn't going to do it at all. Period.
It's going to be a struggle.
You would have to hit materials hard to get that. That's the only way to do it.
So, yes, so I'll start by saying that what I'm about to present is very difficult. It was asked of me by several people that attended some of our budget meetings. And essentially it was to help the board give some direction based on the scale of our need to balance the budget in line with is what you guys are laughing at me.
No, I got to resolve because then you can hear. If there's too many on, you can't hear. So
Okay.
sorry, I can't remember. I'm very sorry. I was just laughing at what she was reading.
So I prepared this little summary for you of a couple of points that I thought would be really important and that we've kind of been peripherally talking about. I did very much hear Tom's comment yesterday about less staff and more compensation for them, or fair compensation. I heard Julie's comment about branches, things like that. So this is reflective of all of that. I will say this is my, I think, 32nd day, right? This is my first month, first day of the second month. So it's not been a lot of time for me to review everything. But as I guess an advantage, I'm able to bring my experience from working in 3 different states in over 30 years to kind of play a little bit of a outside consultant on analyzing where this library district is and what we need to do to move forward to be sustainable and to experience rapid growth as what's estimated, and to give some perspective on what we're currently doing that may be outside the norms of a national practice in the library industry. So I wanted to start by talking about property taxes, and I think this is an important point.
It's this sheet.
It's the sheet that I'm going to be talking about.
I just wanted to make sure that we all were on the same page. Yeah.
Thank you.
Surely.
So the way that our industry views property taxes is that those support and fund basic library services and operations. So taxes are used to support the basic operations of facility, electricity, heating, staffing, programming, and books. So I'm going to call you those sort of like the legs of the table, so to speak. That's the foundation of what property taxes are here to support. Public-private partnerships, grants, sponsorships, donations can all be used to support what I call expanded library services that each community desires, and add, I'm going to call it expanded community-driven facility requests such as fireplace and art galleries. So I will say that some level of programming like basic story times, like computer classes, that would be considered in our industry as a basic operation. There are some things additionally, like you were saying, the juggler, let's say, I'll pick on a juggler or something like that, that may be considered outside of that scope that could be used where grants or donations or sponsorships or public-private funding could support. But there is still a level of programming that would be considered basic services. So does that make sense? Okay. So in looking at everything in terms of the budget and where we're at, part of what I see about this organization is that we're in what I would consider some growing pains. We've been a small district and we have some I'm going to say or characterize them as, I know Lindsay calls them country. So you may have heard that if you've been around a little bit, but we have some, initial or starting sort of practices and guidelines in place. And so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is creating more documents, creating more processes and clarity. And so one of the aspects of that growing is looking at not just making cuts, but increasing our revenues. We could consider, for your consideration, requesting our friends or foundation specifically grant to hire a contract grant writer. So I'm just going to caution in this that the scope of the work needs to be narrowly defined to fit the goals and further our library strategic plan. I've seen this go sideways in the fact that, oh, we can get money to do this, let's go do that. And it's kind of like squirrel and take you off course. So I will say that this would also have the impact on high-level staff in order to supervise and make sure that we are, pursuing only grants or items that further our goals and vision. So I think you mentioned this. We're on the same page. Consider creating a role of volunteer services coordinator to increase the effectiveness and community engagement of volunteer labor. So again, it's not exactly revenue, but free labor is, I'm going to call it in that framework. Again, this is part of that. Things need to be narrowly or clearly defined. So the scope of appropriate volunteer tasks need to fit the service goals and further the library strategic plan. So again, we have to have the vision and the documents in the framework before we can implement something like that, to not essentially take the place of staff and to ensure that we're furthering what we're trying to do. Again, the taxes are used to support basic staffing, and that is a fundamental. So volunteers can also be used to support expanded library services or that only. So another aspect to consider would be improving operational efficiencies. So you can kind of see this is how I think, right? Get more money, be more efficient. So efficiencies, and to Julie's point, I do see some considerations for reviewing our branch open hours. I'm going to throw lots of different things here, but you could eliminate Sunday hours at Hayden and Post Falls. It's currently 60 hours a week. and it would go down to 55 hours a week. You could consider creating summer and winter hour schedules for some of our smaller community libraries that seem to swell in different seasons in terms of population. You could change our small library open hours to something more efficient, like Tuesday through Saturday. And you could also add some predictability and conformity in creating similar hours. Right now, our library branches have different hours open per week, different hours of operation. And so again, just encouraging a little bit more efficiency in the schedule and a little bit more predictability. So currently our small branches are open, I think 29, 32. So it is possible to, and I'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit lower about in terms of what staffing could be changed to get maximum efficiency. So one item that we're doing that most of the nation has moved away from, we currently process all of our books and materials in-house. We could review looking at in-house, we could review looking at vendors that offer what we call shelf-ready materials and processing. It does reduce technical services, material supply costs like book covers and stickers and some labor. But I will say, if you Google this, you'll see large cost savings from other organizations. I don't anticipate the same scale of that because we do currently have volunteer labor doing some of our processing.
I don't understand that. I mean,
Yeah, I can
could you
explain
go
more.
over that again? I don't know.
Yes. So we purchase books through a couple of major national vendors, and the vendors can offer us the bibliographic record or the computer record that we put in there. They can also send us a box, and all of our materials have all of the stickers on it that say Community Library Network, the barcode. They literally come out of the box and we put them on the shelf. Our current process is to take them out of the box and to inventory them and then to process them and then make them available. So in addition to the efficiency of some of the end cost savings for the material processing, it also speeds up the process. So again, we can order something and next week it's in the patron's hand rather than an additional couple of days for us to process. There is some opportunity for efficiency in doing some restructuring of the organization. And I'm sort of framing this as to shift the staffing model to a more standardized model and create a transition plan. I mentioned that our small libraries, the managers typically work 32 hours a week, and there's some benefit increasing them to 40 hours a week and shifting their schedules to, let's say, Tuesday through Saturday. And I would also consider moving some of our 12-hour week positions to create 24-hour week positions with retirement and prorated vacation and sick leave. And this is another one of those areas where there may be a slight cost increase. We would need to modify the personnel policy, but having retirement right now is what we're offering for 24-hour week staff. And so offering prorated vacation and sick leave is also a strong incentive for people to stay and work with us for longer. So it also, there's a lot of benefits. So I would be most in line with recommending a shift to pretty much 24 hours a week or 40-hour week employees. There's other efficiencies right now. When we have a job description, it's like, how many hours is that? And it's everything is all over the place and keeping track of that. And so there are several levels of efficiency if we move to a more standardized model.
That's the cost us to do this, right?
Mm-hmm. So
there's no way this is saving us money. Or is it, are you eliminating enough other positions that it's more efficient for?
That would come farther. And I'm gonna pull back and say, these are just, I'm gonna say areas of opportunity for you to guide me that it's your interest area. So these are all, I'm just gonna pull back and say that these are all areas that I think would benefit the organization. I will also frame it in saying that this is years worth of work and you have 3 weeks. So we're gonna need to be very strategic if you do choose any of these, but I think it's important information for you to be sort of, it's 10,000 here, 10,000 there. To get to 200,000, you're gonna have to climb a mountain and tackle something more substantive. And so this is probably more in line with what you're gonna be needing to do. It could be a combination. It could be, my preference is to know the vision and the end goal. And then as opportunities come up to, let's say, do a 3-to-1 transfer to one position and tweak things, to do those so that, we know we're still on the right path because we're going to our goal or the vision that we want. But it wouldn't necessarily be done in one step. It would preferably be a transition plan and done over time.
And I think this is probably a good idea, but for next.
Absolutely. I'm giving you, I would say this is probably along the lines of 3 years' work for the board.
To me, the salary increase that we're taking from the salary survey, I'm not doubting that it should be done, but we've either got too many people or we're doing too many things or something for our budget. And anything to make the hours more efficient, if you could do that right away, maybe we can't take it in the budget now, but it would help us to, have access or something. But anything that's gonna cost for this year, like we have to wait for another year.
And so part of what I also maybe want to emphasize is that, I think our goal should be to position us in a lean and efficient model. I'll get to the end of it, but we have the additional opportunity on a horizon of facility expansions. And so the question for me and for you is really, how are we going to support additional operational cost if we do have additional facilities? And so again, we have a base of property taxes, and then we do need to start expanding and being mindful. So there's more information I have if you want me to keep going. Okay. So yes, just kind of giving you the vision of where I would like to see our staffing levels and model at in terms of 24 and 40 hours, so part-time and full-time. I also think we could look at seasonal employees as well. We have not explored that quite as much, but if we do shift to let's just say summer and winter schedule, we could maybe gain some efficiency by utilizing some seasonal employees. I am going to mention the Harrison Library and consideration for reviewing its open hours. After working in Pierce County Library System in their outreach services department as their director for many years, there's a service model that I call Clubhouse. In Tacoma, there's on the Sound, there's an island, Anderson Island, and we literally would take the ferry and go to the island and provide, you may call it pop-up library service. We'd bring all the books, we'd bring all the holds, we'd bring the staff, the computers, and then we would be that island's library for the day. And so essentially they received 6 hours of library service, hold pickup, book selection, all the items that you would consider for a full service library. And it was run once or twice a month through our outreach service department. And so holds delivery and new fresh and items were transported. So I will mention that the lease agreement at the Harrison Library, we own the facility, but do not own the property. The property is owned by the Grange, and we have a lease, and that will be due for renewal in 2025. So,
So we own the building?
it is a mobile building, and we own that. It is rapidly aging is how I would describe it, with maybe 10 or 15 years of life expectancy. I will also mention that we have some ADA compliance that we're looking at investing in that facility, and we have a recommendation from our architect to invest in some civil engineering of the site as well.
That's pricey.
Isn't that already identified on the budget using The special funds. I thought I saw that already discussed. But using the carryover funds.
Oh, they received a bequeath. I think maybe, no, that's not the one.
Oh, it was,
We had
Oh, here
said
it
the
is.
capital project to work
Right.
on the sidewalk ramp.
right, right.
Harrison.
Oh, I did see some, okay.
Yeah.
But that's just that's part of the ADA issue, but there's more than just that Alexa is referring to
Oh.
for the civil engineering study.
In a very quick summary, and we could talk a lot more about it, but, the property experienced a lot of water infiltration. And so I think, our architect and, facility manager and I believe that it's in our best interest to review the current state of it. So, I don't have an estimate. A very preliminary estimate would be $5,000 to $10,000 for a survey and architect work in terms of helping us design the ADA compliant ramp. The property is also, the front street is a highway, and so there's additional coordination that would be required for the ADA accessibility from the road to the sidewalk, and that would be the state's responsibility. So there's a couple items.
Is that the facility you're talking about that we need to expand, or is there something else?
In terms of,
You were just saying you
Oh,
need to look in the future to expand.
yeah,
I mean, are we basically starting
Can
from
I-
scratch with that one? Or going to have to?
So, I think it's important that we also take a look at service population. And so, I was teasing Lindsay today that I know it can be done. I cannot personally do it, so I'll have to get a friend help me with it. But you can essentially take a snapshot of all of our library card usage in a week and map it out on GIS and see where everybody lives and kind of, right now I can tell you our total service population, but I couldn't tell you how many card hurdles are at this library, that library, and who actually most of the time uses those. So I'd like to bring more information, but I will say that the population of the town of Harrison is about 250 people. So.
those water problems have been consistent and consistently troublesome and consistently getting worse.
There was a significant change about 2 or 3 years ago. And so obviously we wouldn't be recommending a civil engineer if there weren't some concerns. And sorry, it did a weird printing, so you have to flip on the back. There's a second side. I think, we should continue to look at improving facility efficiency. So we have a project that would help with lighting and then be reimbursed, and then it would leave us with more efficiency in our facilities. There's a project out there about HVAC controls, things like that, so that someone doesn't have to necessarily drive to the location, they can remotely do it. So there's things like that that we can leverage. I will say that we have currently 2 40-hour-week facility staff for our 8 libraries, 7 libraries, and a bookmobile. And we currently have a vacant 24-hour weeks employee, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's a very difficult position to fill, partially based on the number of hours and on the wage. But I do think we need to take some looks at what we're doing internally, what we're having to outsource, and what benefit we might have bringing some of that work. Sometimes outsourcing is more expensive. And so I think it needs to be kind of reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so I'll move on to redefining focus and service models. I would recommend determining an end of service timeline and service model transition for our bookmobiles. And I'll also expand on the concept of outreach services. The national trend is to continue with bookmobiles, but to really closely define what you're wanting to do and then build those buses, if you will, to those goals and objectives. So they generally are smaller, more efficient, don't require commercial driver's licenses, may not have the same size of tire. So I'm not saying that we won't, or I wouldn't recommend bookmobiles, I do, but I think our current large scale bus style bookmobiles is a trend that's sort of being phased out. I think it's been my understanding here that that has been acknowledged by the board in the past. But I would just recommend, in order to create transparency for the community members that are using those services and for the staff and all the stakeholders, that we outline a more determined phase or transition plan.
Bookmobile is, as it is right now, is hugely expensive to replace. And even with John, our director of many, many years, there was talk about this will very likely not be, we won't replace outreach services with another bookmobile like this, that the model itself would change.
Yes, and I think that is true. I agree. So a big bus is going to cost about $500,000, and a Sprinter bus or Sprinter cargo van that can be equipped and can assist staff as a valuable tool in providing library service is more in the $150,000 range. So, 3 Sprinter vans. And so I guess what I'm kind of describing for you too is, from my experience, Harrison fits more of a rural service model, and that falls more under the outreach services. So what I'm saying is that I'm not going to estimate or predict that we're going to reduce outreach services. I would recommend that we tighten the focus and that we start picking up opportunities for those staff to go to Harrison and to do other things, and to, again, clearly define what our goals are so that there's no creep, right? And that we can build those tools to best serve us in the community. So if that makes sense, it's not eliminating, it's just being very targeted and focused. So I was talking a little bit about outreach services. Just want to make a little bit of education in that some of what we do in outreach is considered accommodation service. So homebound, they used to be shut-ins, but you know what I mean, homebound, or people that are recovering from surgeries, or accommodations mean a lot of different things. But our outreach services does play a role in our ability as a library to provide accommodation. So I think that's an important role of outreach. I will describe some of the services that outreach sometimes performs are what I call convenient services. So this is equivalent to like a book return in the grocery store parking lot, right? It's easy, convenient. And so a lot of times your outreach team assist with making service more convenient. And again, if you're talking about an accommodation service or a convenience service, and again, where if you have to make a cut, where does it need to be? So just being cautious that some of the services that we're providing in outreach are more mandatory in our model of service for library services. And then the last thing I kind of mentioned was access. Outreach really focuses on access and rural services like Harrison and things like that. It is part of our service model as well. So some of the things.
Some of the other libraries, but Harrison, I don't know, was that a library, a city library that was already there and we took it over?
They asked to be part, no, we didn't take over any libraries. Only if libraries asked us, and Harrison asked to be part of the district.
Did they already have a facility?
No,
So that was all something we brought in,
right,
low cost, temporary,
yeah.
get started, okay.
So just some items that I wanted to mention that weren't in the budget or considerations for the budget. I mentioned a little bit about a facility master plan is really a key piece of information that we don't have. I can only estimate based on what you guys know living through it, that areas of highest impact seem to be near highways and mass transit or mass arterials and things like that. And so, I like to say facility planning is 30 or 40 years. And so while we're working on a budget that's like now and next year and maybe the year after, we need to be mindful and have the information about, you know, what we need to be able to accomplish in a longer range goal. And that is part of why I kind of frame this in terms of a longer term sustainability model. I would also say that the collection should be 12% of the operating budget. We're currently at 6%. So that is significantly under the national standard. If the interest was to pursue some processing costs included in that 12%, that would be still a significant step forward for the organization. And I'm just going to articulate that back to what property taxes need to support, that its facilities, you know, power, heating, staffing, programming, and books. And so I am extremely reluctant to encourage any further elimination in that line item. I would prefer identifying funds or coming up with a strategy moving forward where we can move towards increasing that back to what is considered appropriate. And I've mentioned we currently have a vacant 24-hour maintenance technician. I think we could find some savings in dropping this year and then trying to rebudget it for 40 hours next year and hopefully at a more appropriate wage. And then,
I'm sorry, how many maintenance technicians are there currently?
so we have 2 full-time. We have a maintenance supervisor essentially, and then the maintenance worker.
So that's a 40 and a
40.
and then there's a 24 that's open. And you're saying dropping it would be
I don't think it's not an easy position to fill. Most maintenance staff would prefer 40 hours, and the wage and benefits are pretty limited. And so I would prefer the opportunity to bring that in at a 40-hour-a-week position. I think we would receive a much higher caliber employee.
So you want the head and then 2 for 40 hours, so 3 total.
And I will again state that that's what we have for our entire district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking when you said drop the 24, meaning, but now I see it's add down here.
Yes, if that makes sense. You know, I don't know that it's money on the table for you, I think. It's not willingly, I wouldn't describe it as willingly, but it's our goal and our vision is to have a full-time employee.
In the last part there, line item is 2425.
Oh, yes, typo.
So you're saying to move, maybe we go the whole year without this 24-hour opening filled, possibly should look towards moving it.
And again, it's only been budgeted 87%. So it's not a huge amount, but it would be at least something. And then I do think we need to start looking at funding some of our outreach and maintenance vehicles and things like that. So we can talk more about that, but that would also be a service shift. So you do have some expensive items that are pending. We do have some services that we need to refine. And so I just thought this might be helpful to the board. I'm not intending this as, you know, do all of this sounds great or do none of it sounds great. This is just what I'm going to call, I'm going to clarify this or classify this as more of feedback from an outside consultant is probably of where we are. And what I highly suspect is that you really need a facility master plan so that we can make long-term sustainable decisions.
If we decided to cut back hours at certain locations, what's the time frame to make that kind of thing happen?
We would prefer having a transition plan and putting something like that together, I think. And officially, the fiscal year starts in October. So that does give us a little bit of time to transition.
So you think that some of that could happen by October.
Especially, I think what would be helpful is just feedback on summer, winter hours, trying to, I can't promise 35 hours. I mean, this is just like a big, maybe we only can do 25 hours in every library or whatever, but would you prefer a Tuesday through Saturday schedule? Would you prefer summer and winter hours? Would you want to see what the value of just Post Falls and Hayden and eliminating Sunday service? So again, none of these have numbers attached. It's just, if any of these seem like things that we should pursue for this next fiscal year, let me know. We only have 3 weeks, so I can't do, like I said, multiple, but we could start putting together some information.
And then if we do cut back days or hours, what does that do to the staff?
As you guys know, somewhere between 66 and 70% of our budget is staffing. And so it would mean a reduction in hours or elimination of positions, or shifting to fill vacancies, things like that.
Or we would do anything like that, I would hope we would have some kind of metrics on. But, number of people using the library on Sundays.
Mhm.
Or every day of the week.
Mhm.
And if there isn't any use, or maybe even somehow or another morning or afternoon or hourly. To know, I don't want to hurt patrons who count on that every Sunday or something.
Well, and some organizations choose to keep one library open on Sunday and then, have another day in the week during. So there's plenty of options. I'm just sort of giving you some ideas of what is pretty common in libraries.
I'd encourage you to look at that and see if there's low hanging fruit that we can just. I propose to close down on Sunday or close earlier on Saturday.
Okay, so do we have some kind of consensus on reviewing the branch open hours? I'm open to all 3 options. Do you guys have a favorite or one that you don't like at all, or?
I would like to say them. What you're doing here, the beginning of what you're doing here is basically what we also put in our brochure that we wanted our new director to do. And this was very much in line with doing the compensation study and then looking at. It also has become apparent on some of the things that we may have overextended ourselves service-wise. And the only reason I'm saying this is because this is sort of breathtaking and it's very short amount of time. But I have absolutely no idea how to balance this budget. You have already taken out. I mean, we could nickel and dime it, with a little bit here, a little bit there. That's not going to do anything. We have to look at how we're providing service and what that's costing.
And Rochelle, to your point, are you talking about under improving operational efficiencies?
Yes.
I would say that those aren't actually 3 options. I would say that they could all be one function.
Okay.
Do you think so? I mean,
Yeah.
because if you eliminate Sunday hours at Hayden Post Falls, you could still have a summer winter schedule at all the locations and still have the small library open, we could have all 3. So I would definitely like them to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I just didn't want to. I wanted to hear everyone
Right.
to chime in on.
Well, we can prioritize. If you had limited time to work on it, my opinion would be check for the easiest things to verify or the most benefit first. And to me, that would be the Sunday hours. And then maybe in the order that you've got them here, just work on them one at a time instead of trying to do them all at once.
And since the salary thing seems to be a big piece, obviously, of the budget, will say, I'm not fully understanding where we are in terms of getting into the new pay schedule. And so if we've already, and I don't know this, gotten to the temporary minimum that we'll call it pink, it doesn't look pink, but they call it pink line or row or column. Are we at the minimum yet? And is there an adjustment? And the reason I'm asking that is because and I don't know what the timeline was, meaning I don't know when we took the last pay raise and how much that was overall. But what I was wondering was, and Ken, I told you, I like people being compensated decently within the market for sure. Because I like getting paid a lot in the past. Is there a way to delay if there's a pending pay raise? I don't mean delay for another year, but can we say we take that raise 6 months later than we normally would? So that we don't throw the scale out, because I know it takes a lot of time and money to get a pay scale aligned with the market. And if you don't keep it maintained, and that's even in the report, it becomes obsolete, in a short time. So it'd be nice to keep us on a schedule to be in market range. But is there a way to save enough money by delaying it, and not putting it off indefinitely and not putting it off for another year, but putting it out a few months later? Because I like people getting raises if they not deserve as much as if that's market for where they should be paid. Well, I like to keep people that are qualified, and it's tough living out there. So I'm not looking to overpay people, but I want them compensated for knowledge, skills, and abilities.
So there's two, maybe just to add to that, there's two increases I see. We're at the pink now. And going to the minimum, the blue that's on the paper, I look at the first two levels, A and B, it's about 5% increase. All of the others are 10 to 10.5% increase just to go to the blue. And that's what I understood was at least going to happen in October. And then on top of that, there's a second increase, which is the 2% cost of living. And if I look at the salary line item, 2% of 3 million is 60,000. So I think there's a 60,000 over just going to this minimum blue, which for most people, it's a 10% increase. That's what I'd like to see, if we can cut out that or delay that 2% and maybe still go to the blue, but I don't know if that's more detailed than what you wanted, Tom.
Well, and I was just going to ask for clarification. So, a change in scale does not have to happen October 1st. That's the beginning of our fiscal year. It could be timed January 1st or some other aspect like that. It could start mid-year. There's so many options, and that's why we haven't presented them. But, there can be a one-time payment, so to speak, that doesn't affect the scale. But again, it helps the current staff in that position, but then your scale remains, again, below market value. So there is flexibility in when it starts, which would have budgetary impact for the whole year as well.
So you're not saying retro pay when it's a delayed start?
You don't have to pay retro pay. That is a decision as well.
Okay. Do you think it's important, Sharon? Do you think it's important, and it may not be, that we try to decide if we're going to go with scenario A or B? Because it helps to know what our actual goal money-wise is.
Which one would you suggest that we get a consensus on first?
So there's two items that are both probably helpful: the 0%, 1%, 2%. Increase, or another option that is sort of, I'm going to say, another option than A and B.
Before we get into that, I was going to just ask a general question. When the auditor was here, I asked about the fund and how much we have, and I'm still not really clear she did a snapshot of what it would be last September. Can we put a line item where we tap into the fund? Because I've talked to several people in the county, and the general guideline is 2 months operating expenses in your fund that you need to have. she mentioned 15%. We're like 33%, I think, if we're 2 million. Can we use some of that money to, and actually just add a line item from the fund?
The fund, is the fund, what you're talking about is the.
He's
carry
talking
forward?
about the, yes,
No,
the
the carry
reserve.
forward
fund.
The carry forward,
Yes.
fund balance, the money that we have in our bank at the assets that we have at the end of the year.
Well,
That are not
they're split into a couple different areas.
There's two areas that we can only carry forward money in two ways. One is a carry forward, or the auditor calls it a fund balance. And then the other way is we can carry forward money in a car fund, but those are the only two ways we can have money.
But some are off limits.
The CARF is off limits, because that's money that we move for facilities. So, the fund balance is basically we don't get a big paycheck, we get paid big paychecks twice a year. And we get one in July and one in January. The fund balance is the money that we need from October 1 through the end of January to operate. That's all it is. It's not.
2 million. You showed 2.4 million unassigned. That's what was the word I was looking for.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen a budget for our carry forward this year. So, and that was from the audit for last year.
Right.
Okay, we would be carrying forward something different in our budget this year.
But-
We had weird years. That was a weird year. So that isn't exactly what we would have this year.
What I wondered is how much is in this fund, and what I understood was the unassigned is what is available to us. And if we're obligated to have 2 months operating expenses, maybe 15% is what she said.
4 months, we need 4 months, October, November, December, and January. We don't get another big
I'm
paycheck.
talking about what's left after a 20 or a 12-month cycle. I'm not trying to slip into the middle.
Okay, but at the end of our budget, we have to have money to operate for October, November, December, and January, because we get no income.
I understand that,
So that's what that carry forward is.
but we don't go down to basically zero by the time the January payment comes in. What is our balance when the January payment comes in, is what I'm wondering, I guess. Can anybody answer that? I think we got more money in this fund. And the taxpayers didn't have to keep keeping the funds so big.
We can calculate an estimate of what it may be, but again, it will only be an estimate. I can't give you down to the dollar, because I won't know that until after the end of the fiscal year.
Is it something like 2 million? Because that's what we're talking about.
It's still around in the 2 million mark. But part of that is because we've had savings over the last several years from COVID that we haven't spent. We've had projects that we couldn't do because of COVID. And so it continued over into the fund balance, or we call it carry forward. But from a conservative fiscal standpoint, we have always made sure that we had 4 months to get us through the end of January in case the county is late in disbursements, which has happened before.
Well, but once the county makes the payment, even if they're late, how much do we have left that's still available in general? How much was left?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers for each year.
Was this 2 million in the audit? Was that?
That was just for the
at that?
end of last fiscal year.
So that's what we needed for
To operate.
4 months of operating expense.
That is what was available.
Well, but that was the intent.
That was the intent, yes,
So that would be October, November, December,
January.
January. So 4 months. And if we've got, yeah, so that's a third of $1 million or $6 million if we're really using 6 million. Maybe that's 2 million. Okay.
In the past, we've had a budget for the carry forward so that we could show the public why we had that. Is there any chance that we could have something like that again? I know we have had that.
Is that to say what we would potentially do with it or why we have extra money?
Both.
Okay, because I think if I understood Tim's question correctly, and you can correct me if I guess typically, I'm saying normally, we get paid, say, from the county in January and July. What would be our typical, not an exact figure, balance, let's say, in December, which is the month before we get paid, or in June? Do we normally have more, considerably more than 4 months worth of reserve? I like a good cushion, believe me, I like a safety margin because I don't want any hiccups and have to borrow money to cover. But do we typically have well over 4 months worth of excess funds, we'll call it,
I would say
in those 2 months, in the month prior to our
I
getting?
would say in the last 5 years or so, we have averaged between having 4 and 6 months worth of monies available as we approach.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I don't mind if we have a little more than we need, because I don't ever want to be sweating a paycheck coming in from the county. But I also don't want to be sitting on a couple $1 million because we can. And if we're not, that's great.
But maybe 100,000 is something that be available if we're, and we could use it to fill in and not have to cut salary, not have to do things. If we've taken more in the past than maybe we really needed to, that's what I'm looking for, is a way to balance it by adding a line item.
So do we have a little bit too much carry forward money that we can use to soften the discrepancy at the bottom line here?
That is something I can look at, certainly.
Yeah.
Without cutting us too close.
As we get close, when we get our final numbers from the county, is really the best opportunity for me to forecast what we are going to need for the rest of the year. And helps me determine really how much we will have at the end of the year. So it's kind of hard to guess right now because, we still have the rest of, this month. And then I'm forecasting for a couple months of what might happen. So again, it's still an estimate, but we can get that. And then we can show the expenses that we are planning for the first 4 months of this next fiscal year and why we need that carry forward fund. And if we have extra, then, you guys have the option to purposely reduce your fund balance.
I would just mention that, I remember in 2008 when property taxes were in arrears and organizations were left with, I'm going to call it short checks, and eventually everything came up and got paid, but there are anomalies like that happen as well. And so, I don't know what the property taxes and the market is doing, and there seems to be a lot of talk about it. So, again, there are other factors, if you will, that also give you that sense of to risk it or not risk it, if that makes sense. So
So the counties, some county officers that I've talked with basically would advise or say that in January, before we get our payment, you would want 2 months of operating expense. You want some cushion for the lowest part of the cycle. So if we've got more than 2 months operating expense,
But if we have,
not capital, but operating.
but if we have 4 months until the next check, why would we only want 2 months of operating expense?
No, when January comes, just before the next year's payments start, we should have 2 months operating expense on the books still. That's the cushion to go for, what I've heard. And if we've got far more than that, or estimating far more than that, I would like to use some of it instead of charging the taxpayers more.
And I'm going to assume that money is there, not just in case there's a hiccup in getting our money from the county. Is it also there to take care of some unanticipated expense out of the blue? Because in that case, if it is, I like having, I don't mean an incredible reserve, but I like having spare, so we don't have emergency financially.
Agreed. So, back to the 0%, 1%, 2%, 3%, we're not voting on that at this time, but what are you guys leaning towards?
0%, or maybe even less, because I know my property tax, even though the values, assessed values doubled or whatever, and the county raised 3%, and my property tax went up 5 to 6%, somewhere like that, the bottom line, but the library last year went up 14%. And I don't think we should be hitting the taxpayers. So
And if there's any question, I think since we're getting an estimated growth amount of $100,000, I guess based on assessments and new structures or whatever out in the county, that's nice. We're getting more money in, and I don't want to take any percentage increase beyond just whatever the estimated growth amount, which is estimated 100,000. I'd rather go with 0 and then try and figure out how do we balance this and not raise taxes. That's my strong preference. And still pay people decently.
That's quite a wish list you have there. I've always been the 0% girl. Hopefully nobody's talking of not taking, new growth. I'm hoping nobody's trying to say we should do that. And I'm not sure what less than 0% is, unless you mean, what do you mean by that? Less than 0%, -1?
great. Yeah, I think -1 is an option, but, no, we have to take the new growth, from what I understand. That's all Alexis giving me information on that. So that's not an option. I mean, the county, or maybe I'm wrong, but the county added assessed values, and the assessor role this year is gonna be higher. So basically, you're reducing everybody's taxes if you don't take it.
Okay,
If you
so.
keep it 0, you take it.
So I have always been a 0%. I just don't know how we're gonna get it done at 0. I know last year when we ended up going with 2, that was a struggle, and we went back and forth. Some of us started at 0, some started at 3, and we kind of ended up at 2. But realistically, I don't know how, like, Tom's wish list will get done. And it's not gonna get done by taking 10,000 from here or there. It's just not. And I know I keep saying this, but the only way to give a raise, even if it's scenario A, with 0% is taking from materials. Which nobody wants to do. So I just hope everybody's really getting that in their heads, that we are at a wall and things are gonna have to give.
Now, do we generally, as a board, because I didn't know until Katie told me, or us yesterday, I think you said it, typically the budget is presented to us, it's already pretty much balanced, I thought you said that. When it's presented from the staff, typically or usually. Do we say, based upon what we're doing now, and I don't mean this to shirk our duties, do we like to throw it back at the library, admin staff that we call it? And say, okay, given what we want to do, we want you to get paid well, we don't want to take a pay raise, an increase in taxes. Take another shot at it and give us another proposal, or do we, I'm not trying to throw the ball your direction and not, but is that how you do? I don't know how we do
That
this.
is absolutely how we do it. That is the way to do it. We're expected to do that. We give the general direction and we hand it back to the staff and say, we need to look at it this way. If we were to start nickel and diming it, or taking away a little bit here, a little bit there, that is not in our, it's not what we are told to do in our job description. So we hire a professional, which we have, who understands the libraries, and then she will develop a budget. So this is, we throw it back and say, okay, we want to look at here. We like these ideas. How can you bring us back some numbers where we balance? the reason that it doesn't balance right now, I mean, we kept saying this to you and that, you know, our last few years have been really wonderful years, but we were going to hit a wall at some point in time, and we have. And that, what they're doing is showing us the reality. And now we have to say, we don't know, how can we maintain a library district and do the wishes that people are saying here? And the only people that can do that correctly, I would think, would be the staff. Not, I would think, I know.
Yeah, and also, Tom, I know, yesterday, you had mentioned that we had said we were behind on the budget even before you guys got sworn in.
I
And
thought I heard.
no, you did. We absolutely told you guys that because Rochelle and I, for sure, I don't know when the last time you didn't have a balanced budget. We knew that it's hard enough. We get this the last 2 years, it's balanced, but we still take hours and hours and hours talking about, adding more to this instead of taking from that. It's always difficult. So we knew before you guys were even on the board that we were behind because it's not balanced. And we know how Rochelle and I and Katie, of course, know how long it takes to get this done when it's already balanced. So that's why we knew already we were behind. And then also, I'm sure you know this, but this has been worked over by them tremendously already. And yes, it will go back to them, but it already has been worked over several times. So each time we have a meeting, it goes back to them and they bring it to us. And that's how we try to work it out. Yeah, right?
Okay, so did you give a figure for which column you would prefer?
Well, no, I haven't actually, because none of them work. None of them work.
6%.
So, even if you took the 3, it's not balanced. So you'd still have to attack materials or something, not snow removal. So, in my opinion, we cannot take 0 if we also want to give any kind of a raise, because it's impossible. So we got to either say no to the raises or no to the 0%. And take a percentage and maybe give less of a raise.
I can tell you how I am doing it to 0. I'm taking away the 2% COLA cost of living, and I'm just going to moving to pink. That's cutting out 60,000 is what I'm doing. I'm also looking at cutting 30,000 out of adult children program materials or the charge you have. I'm also looking at, I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but line item 42, library equipment. We got $87,000, and my understanding is that it's to replace older computers. I'd like to say that for some of them a year. I'd like to take 40,000, reduce that to 47, take 40,000 back. If we get the E-rate, we would come out balanced, or actually a little bit ahead with the 0%. And I don't know whether the equipment is a way to, I don't see why we can't delay replacing some of the computers for another year. But most people are still getting a 10% increase. I'm just asking to not do the 12%, the extra 2%, because these charts, every one of them except for, and we can give more to the minimum wage ones, but those first 2 line items are 5%. It's going to be all the others are 10 or 10.5%. That's what I'm looking at.
And I'm assuming, if we do that, it's gonna throw the table out of whack a little bit, because now, again, you're gonna have people that are in lower level job, I'll call it. I think the meaning, let's say in the ABC area, getting paid a little bit more, now the difference between them and the next group up is gonna be thrown out a little bit, so.
No,
That's,
no, it's whatever's on the blue, what they had. It's just that we're maybe the cost of living, because if you look at the chart, the numbers she's got in, or you got in there are 2% higher on every item than what the minimum in blue is. I'm just saying, next year do a 3 or 4%, but this year we can't handle doing 12%. Let's do a 10%.
And I believe legally we can only do 3%.
No, no,
We're touching, he's talking about something.
the salary.
Right.
Jumping
Okay.
from the pink
Right.
to 2% higher. That's all I meant. And we
That
need to-
puts us behind, is that correct? It starts putting us behind, it just keeps.
We're
putting us
already behind in
Right,
either
we're already behind,
scenario.
and we just keep going behind, I mean,
Both A and B, we're already gonna be behind a year.
yeah,
But next year we can do a 3 or 5%, and we're not trying to do a 10.
With what
12%.
extra money?
where?
What next year? There's not all of a sudden gonna be,
We won't have
extra
to do,
money.
we won't have to do a 10 or 12%, we'll have to do a 5%. So the salary increase won't hit it as hard next year as what it is this year, trying to do it all at once.
I mean, this year's increase is the biggest and hardest one.
Yes,
Last year's was a little less hard, but this by far is the hardest year. And this is why it is painful and this is why it is not balanced. Because we need to know priorities.
Michelle, I forgot, did you already ask us about if we want scenario A or B? Did you already ask that?
Not this session.
Okay. You wanted to wait, is that what you were saying?
Well, I think Alexa wanted to know the 0, 1, or 2,
Okay,
3 first.
okay.
So Katie, what are you leaning towards?
I know this community would like a 0%. I wouldn't mind taking another percent, up to 2% maybe. I know that 3% is just, I like that we are looking at places, to adjust. Where does staff think the biggest savings could be? I have a challenge. Not giving the 2% COLA, and just because we're starting that up, but perhaps that is a good idea, I don't know. I do like the idea. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna take a line or not a line. I need to know where we can be. I mean, are any of these things here going to reduce the budget in a way that would help us balance? Or are these just go, I mean, I would really like us to review branch out open hours. Is that going to reduce the budget? Does that just reduce staff? And then that, I like restructuring the organization, but does that help us with this issue we have right now, balancing the budget?
I think it's more of a first year, second year, third year, and knowing the vision of where you want to go. I do think there could be savings, but I need to run those numbers and look at how I asked just today, how many positions does it take to make one 24-hour? You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of like restructuring. And so there's more information that I need before I can answer that. I needed the direction that people were interested or willing to go in that. I do believe there can be cost savings. Less hours, more efficient hours.
I personally want to go there, but that doesn't really help us where we're at with this specific budget. Is that correct?
It could, if I get on it quickly, it could. So
I'm horrified at the.
I will say our open hours, you guys received some information about our open hours and how that relates to other libraries and access.
Yes.
So I do believe there's, and I don't know if Tom and Tim have seen that. And so I think that is part of the picture that I have knowledge of that you may not yet. But that's part of why I'm saying we need to streamline our hours. We need to look at what should be rural service, how we characterize what the service population for each library is so that we can, again, put it in a model for efficiency. It's kind of like taking a jackhammer to a project that you need a hammer, right? Like we may be over serving or doing things that are more expensive than what we need to do to
So what I'm
provide
asking
service.
Is there anything that can be done in 3 weeks that would change this budget?
Yes, the personnel line item could change.
Um, and
So-
not, and I guess I'm horrified at the thought of taking $30,000 away from programs. You know, they aren't huge budgets to begin with, and that is absolutely something, it's one of our basic operations. And we've already cut both of those, programs up. I would really like us to look at the carry forward and to see if we need that much carry forward. Can we trim our carry forward in any way? So that it is, yes, we don't want to be stuck, but we also don't want to be having more than we need.
Mhm.
But I'm not certain as to what to say, which line item. I'm like, can we get a balanced budget on any of them? You know, and support this increase in staff. And the trouble is that this increase in staff is going to have to be supported from now on. So it is not like, next year we only have to raise it this much. I mean, we have to support this next year and the year after and the year after.
I would additionally like to bring some information on our technology, what do they call that? A replacement cycle, because I think you might be shocked and a little horrified already. And so just preparing you, and it's, we run a very lean, efficient machine in several areas, in all areas, but that area in particular. Our software budget, also very lean. So, I'll bring more information because I know you specifically asked for that.
Yeah, because I've heard, I've seen hardware replacement sometimes being about a 5-year cycle. I don't know if that's normal. I know technology changes fast, but I think that was one of the numbers I've seen in the past.
That's what I would consider industry standards in libraries, 5 years, and I believe it's in excess of that.
And I'm just asking, move it to 6 years, for half of them. If we're doing 87, I said 40,000 instead of 80. Just reduce it by 40,000. And the other I didn't even bring up was the telecom after Janelle explained it. I don't understand, we're not gonna solve anything now, but I used to have an internet wireless service provider business. I don't know why if we're really running fiber, paying for fiber lines to each of the libraries, why they don't just get internet service and we do VPN here. People do this all the time for promoting and work. They just do VPN. So have those big distant libraries instead of a fiber line connecting them, just do VPN. It's virtual private. I think there's low hanging fruit there, maybe. I don't know.
And another preference would be, to me, I would rather reduce hours if there's a tangible dollar value in that before I raise taxes, if that's an option. So a small population, not really small, but a library population that uses it suffers a little bit by having fewer hours. For the taxpayers as a whole will benefit by not having increases in their taxes. So I really feel very strongly I would like to see a zero increase. I'm not looking for a decrease because we got a really tough year here. I just feel strongly I don't want to increase taxes if there's any way possible.
Head enough direction.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I also would lean towards the 0% increase, and hopefully the hours, it did sound like there was consensus on review of branch open hours.
Mhm.
And maybe whatever new proposal comes out, a little bit better understanding I could use still of the salaries. I don't mean line by line. I don't know when a salary increase was already taken in this current fiscal year, as opposed if there's another one pending this year. and how many are out there for next year. I don't really have a good feel for it. So I'm not opposed to it, believe me, it's hard many times, but I don't really understand where we are in our migration from the current to this newer pay scale. And that's, I don't understand it fully, to be honest with you.
Traditionally, raises for the library district have happened once a year at the beginning of the fiscal year,
Okay.
which the pink column occurred at the beginning of this fiscal year, or was retro back to this fiscal year.
That's current.
There's no other raises planned in this fiscal year.
Okay.
The next raise planned is whatever scenario we come up with to start in the next fiscal year, at whatever point in the fiscal year that may be asked to start.
And that would put people on the blue.
Depending on which scenario you choose. Yeah, like either the blue or blue plus 2%. That makes
Got
sense.
it. Yep, I understand that. And the 2% would normally go out on October 1st on a normal year.
I think there's maybe a misunderstanding of the 2% from the salary consultants. They had recommended that we raise the wage range because the blue column was what we really should have been at last October that we could not afford. So we're a year behind. And so they're saying in one way to, get to market is to take the wage range we were supposed to be last year and increase it by that 2%. And I think what you're saying is keep us below market by not taking that and only going to what we should have been last October.
And next year, do better, because we only have, I think we could do 5% for you then.
Okay, so, our budget.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I really would like us to, take a leap and look at, budgeting the E-rate as if we had received it. I understand that traditionally that people are against that, but, this might be a year that we have to do that.
Okay, so we are moving on to our material selection policy discussion. I was hoping to amend the one that we already had that we approved in November 22.
Okay, wait a second. What did you say?
I would like to amend the material selection policy that we approved in November.
Was it?
Wait a minute, it's in the table packet?
Yes.
Can you give us a second to get to it?
Okay.
Did you have something for you prepared? I have something.
I would like to, so it was you, Rochelle, who put this on the agenda?
Yes. First of all, something that stood out to me under, on page 1, under responsibility, it says the responsibility for the selection of library materials rests ultimately with the library director. I believe that the last time I was reading through our trustee manual, that by law, it actually rests with the board of trustees.
Do you know which pages that you kept?
No, I should have done that before the meeting.
So it's in the trustee manual?
I believe so. I said by statute.
I brought mine if you want to find it for us. It would be helpful
Yeah.
to know what citation you're referring to.
This.
Yes, that's what she was saying.
What about the sentence right after that? Does that not kind of go with that first sentence or no?
It does, but I believe that it said that the responsibility lies with board of trustees. So I just, I'm
I think it's
thinking that,
important that we find where that's said,
yes, I agree.
like, I don't know if we can.
Well, I don't expect that we're gonna be done with this today. We're just introducing the topic. So yeah, that's something that we can find before we discuss this again.
So are you voting on this today?
So this is just a discussion, it says, that's all, it's not an action.
It is an action item.
Okay.
So I mean,
But-
I would just say if you're gonna amend something, I would like to know where it says it in here, just so for the board to discuss.
Right.
Because if there's multiple
I certainly
interpretations
don't
of
want any
it, or,
amendments made today. I want time to be able to look at it and
Right, well,
respond.
yeah, what we've done in the past is,
Taken a few months.
we've made drafts and,
Right.
then, whatever's new or have, whatever's new is then read.
So are you saying that if the responsibility for the selection of library materials rests ultimately with the Board of Trustees, does that mean we would have to like review every book that comes through our doors?
No, I think that we're responsible for it in as much as we make the policy.
Which is the second sentence.
Right, and then that's, the second sentence is fine. It's just that, it seemed like that first sentence, conflicted with statute, Idaho statutes.
Okay.
The word.
Statutes or the trustee manual?
I believe that the trustee manual gave the statute. I just, when I was reading through it again, I should have been making notations.
Yeah, because even the third sentence now, it even defers it further down. Under the director's guidance, selection is delegated to professional collection development library staff who are qualified by education, training, and experience. So that's a whole nother.
Layer.
Yeah,
And I'm
Yeah, and that's fine. I
interested
think
in
that's
the
the way it's
statute
supposed
thing because it's certainly, my understanding from the statutes is that we establish policies. That's how we govern. So, okay. So, all right, I don't know where else it would
Maybe
be.
it's the word ultimately, it rests with the library director to follow policy that ultimately trustees.
So it should just be added, I don't know, I haven't read this thing until now. I mean, recently, ultimately with the library director, I guess, in line with or in the policies made by the board or whatever, I'm not gonna word it right now, but.
well, look at the sentence.
Obviously, it has to fall within the policy that we have.
Yeah, look at the second sentence, read it out loud.
The elected board of trustees guides the selection process through this policy. So I don't know if that solves it or not, but do we need to tune up the policy then? Is that what we're, I don't know.
Yeah, so since I don't have the statute, that idea has been introduced, but we won't make any changes to a draft.
And Tim, you said you had something written out already?
Yeah, I've got my version, but I think it'll match with it. Basically, I'm just prefer to leave the whole paragraph intellectual freedom. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
She's getting to that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I wanted to add a preamble to the policy if, just in the past, it's kind of like our previous director was saying that it was the public's responsibility to challenge the books. But I can't think of any other policy that a board makes that it's up to the public to enforce. So I wanted to add a preamble that says something to the effect, as with all policy, it is not the responsibility of the public to carry out. It is the responsibility of the director to ensure it is carried out. And it wouldn't have to be word for word.
And I understand that phrase. I don't have a problem with that. I hope you wouldn't get rid of the other though, because sometimes books come through that the director doesn't know, or even the material selection person doesn't know exactly word for word. And when the public reads it and they're like, oh my God, then they, do their reconsideration.
Oh, no, they definitely should have the challenge
Okay.
process. I'm just saying it shouldn't be pushed off onto them as if
Okay.
it's their responsibility, because policy guides the library, not
Right.
the public.
And Rochelle, I think I found maybe what you're saying then, Idaho statute 33-2720, powers and duties of the board of trustees. To establish policies for the purchase and distribution of library materials. That's maybe what you're thinking, to establish the policy.
What is that?
33-2720.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's it. I'll find it before
But there's at least
we discuss it again.
responsibility for folks.
Idaho code, or is that,
Yeah, Idaho statutes, 33-27.
Okay, so, for intellectual freedom, wanted to leave part of the first sentence, the choice of library materials is an individual matter. I wanted to insert the words for adults. And then, delete the rest of that section and delete the attached, ALA policy or,
So that first sentence ends with for adults.
yeah, so it would read, the choice of library materials is an individual matter for adults.
And delete the entire paragraph.
Delete the rest of that section, through where it says selection process,
Oh.
or so before where it says.
so all of
selection process.
intellectual freedom besides the one sentence?
Yes,
And
This
I
is
changed the heading myself, just to leave the heading.
the censorship.
No, intellectual freedom,
Oh.
why call it heading for one sentence?
That's your additional edit, is to remove that heading. Now that you've heard,
I would like to do that.
So then it would be under responsibilities without a heading. It would be under responsibilities.
I suppose, or maybe under selection process, I don't know. Intellectual freedom is meaningless for.
We normally do a policy, does somebody draft up their version of a tuned up new policy? Present that to the board members to read in advance and then we come in, I don't know how it works.
We give it to the director and it was that best practice is that the director usually presents a policy that is in line with what public libraries do in this country. And then we get examples from other libraries. Is that correct, Alexa?
It is, and very similar to the budget process that we're just going through. Usually the feedback is given about what items are for review or feedback for changes. And so usually all of that is done. But again, normally it is also on a meeting that has public comment. So I'm just going to strongly encourage the board to, I appreciate some of the information that's being provided, but I think it is a best practice to put some of these on our regular meetings that public comment. Oftentimes public comment is relating to the policies that you're reviewing. And so again, that is part of the process. It does take a little bit of time. But it is for the best of the community.
Yeah.
But how does the community, let's just make, we do this at the next board meeting, the next regularly scheduled board meeting on a Thursday, whatever. How would the community know what they're gonna comment on, absent us already having something to say, hey, this is the direction we're going, here's a draft. Now go ahead and take shots at it or compliment it. I'm trying to understand
That's
process
exactly,
how we go about this, because, to sit here and not being critical, it's difficult to write a document up as a group. But it's ideas, okay, we want to make some changes, somebody makes some draft changes and then present them, we talk about it, and then the public can give us, I don't know how mechanically we go through this process.
okay, and I know that you came to a couple meetings,
Yes.
so you've seen it. There's people that follow the library board meetings, as you know. So when they see material selection policy is an action item, they're gonna be like, I'm not sure what they're gonna wanna change, but I wanna be there to listen to what they're saying. They'll know it's about this policy. And then the other thing you just said, oh, yeah, we don't sit here and make these policies up, actually. They're presented to us by the people that actually run the factory and know what would even go into them. And yeah, they hand them to us and we might be like, oh, wait, let's change it. And then we can change it. We can cross things out, change it, as long as it follows the law. But yeah, we don't sit here and write
How
up
does it
our.
get in the factory's hands? I mean, what is the catalyst for that? Meaning, Tim doesn't just call Alexa and say, hey, rewrite the material selection and present it in the next meeting. I don't understand how does it become a discussion item? Because it'd be pretty painful to try and rewrite this thing together as a group. And then we're not gonna try and hide it from the public, but how does it get in motion?
And I object.
Can Alexa address that for us?
There's a couple of means. So we do have a board calendar, which I'd like to draw everybody's attention to if you haven't seen it. I have mentioned that I'd like to have a policy review calendar as well. There is time on your regular meeting where it talks about topics for agenda. That's typically how this board has historically moved forward with bringing forth ideas. So policy review can come from me because of a change in a law or a change in a best practice or a concern of staff. Let's say our rules of conduct, all of a sudden we have skateboarding, or all of a sudden we have an issue. So it can be community driven, it can be public driven, it can be staff driven, it can be board driven. In terms of calendaring cycles, I'm actually very impressed. All of our approvals on most of our policies are within the last couple of years. That's outstanding. Some libraries have policies that have been in place 10 years and are not reviewed. So again, that shows quite an effort to coordinate so that everything is in front of the board and everything is current. So if that makes sense, the process for a trustee is to talk about it at a regular meeting at that end of the agenda for topics for discussion.
Okay.
It sounds like,
Well,
go ahead.
It's 4 o'clock, so we're gonna need a motion to.
I don't want any more discussion on this policy without public comment in it. I want us to end on time. This was brought to us in a way that is not appropriately transparent.
It was put on the agenda just like it always has been.
In a special meeting, I want to say one thing about intellectual freedom is that is a core value of public libraries.
Yeah, I thought you didn't extend the meeting.
I would like to move that we adjourn.
That's also right. We don't have any dates to set, right? So
We're
we're
good.
good. Okay, so are you making a motion on that?
I
No.
did, I moved
Okay.
to adjourn.
All right, is then moved to adjourn.
Yeah.
Everyone in favor?
Right.
Okay, the ayes have it and the meeting is adjourned.